I almost didn't go. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I almost skipped the whole trip, took the tube home, made pasta, watched something forgettable on my laptop. A Tuesday in late spring with the kind of pale gold light that makes London look like it's apologizing for all the grey months. I had no real reason to be near Windsor that afternoon. My cousin had dragged me out under the premise of a walk, which meant she wanted to talk about her boyfriend for 2 hours while I nodded and pretended to have opinions. So we walked. And that's the only reason I saw it. Windsor was doing the thing it does on warm weekday afternoons, not packed, not quiet, somewhere in that middle register where the tourists are mostly families and school groups, everyone slightly dazed from castle entry fees, children dragging behind their parents like anchors. The long walk stretched out ahead, that extraordinary ribbon of gravel and grass flanked by chestnut trees old enough to have opinions. There were dog walkers. A man flying a kite that wasn't quite catching the wind. A group of Italian teenagers taking turns photographing each other against the castle backdrop. Normal. Completely normal. My cousin was mid-sentence about something, I genuinely cannot remember what, when she grabbed my arm. Not aggressive. Just the instinctive grip of someone who has spotted something and isn't sure their eyes are working correctly. I followed her gaze. And there, maybe 40 meters ahead, walking along the edge of the path at a pace that was almost deliberately unhurried, was a man with a little girl. The man was tall. Broad in the shoulders in the particular way of someone who doesn't need to perform it, it was just how he was built. He was in dark trousers and a casual jacket, nothing that announced anything. The girl beside him was small, maybe 8 or 9, in a pale blue jumper with her hair half escaping a ponytail, one hand swinging loose, the other tucked inside his. It took me a full 10 seconds. And then, it landed. That's Prince William. That's Princess Charlotte. My cousin's grip tightened. Neither of us said anything out loud because some instinct, or maybe just the hush that had already begun to settle through the nearby cluster of visitors who'd also noticed, kept us quiet. You don't announce it. You don't shout it. You just hold still. And watch something that clearly isn't meant for you. Which was what made it so extraordinary. They weren't performing. There was no performance in them at all. Charlotte stopped first. That's how it started, not with anything William did, but with her. She just stopped, the way children stop, with total commitment and zero warning, her small trainers going still on the gravel path. She'd spotted something. I couldn't see what from where I was standing, but she crouched down with the focused urgency of a child who has discovered something the adult world has completely failed to notice. William stopped beside her. He didn't crouch immediately. For a second he just stood there, hands sliding into his pockets, watching her. There was something in his posture, a kind of patient readiness, like he had nowhere to be and had decided that genuinely, not as an act of discipline. He looked like a man who had learned to be present. Not performing attentiveness. Actually there. Then, he crouched. And they were the same height. Father and daughter, eye level to the ground, examining whatever small mystery Charlotte had found in the gravel. A stone, maybe. A beetle. I'll never know, and somehow that feels right, that the specific thing stays theirs. But what I could see, even from 40 meters, even through the soft haze of afternoon light filtered through chestnut leaves, was the conversation. Not the words. The shape of it. Charlotte was explaining something with the full-body animation of a child who was certain she has discovered something important. Both hands involved. Head tilting. At one point she looked up at him with that particular expression, the one that's really a question disguised as a statement, and William's response was to lean slightly closer, like whatever she was saying deserved more of him. He laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not the controlled, measured smile of a man at a function. An actual laugh, the kind that catches you off guard, that comes from somewhere unguarded, that doesn't know it's being watched. The Italian teenagers had stopped photographing each other. The man with the unsuccessful kite had let it drop. A woman with a double buggy was standing very still on the path behind them, and I could see her pressing her lips together in the way people do when they are trying very hard not to cry in public over something they weren't expecting to feel. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The two of them crouched there in the gravel, entirely absorbed in one small thing, and the rest of us, strangers from a dozen countries, with our maps and our packed lunches and our complicated interior lives, we all just held our breath and watched a father and his daughter forget the world. Here is the thing about grief that nobody tells you. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives as a warm feeling that shouldn't hurt but does. I'd lost my dad 18 months earlier. A long illness, a slow goodbye, all the paperwork and the casseroles people bring and the particular exhaustion of grief that isn't dramatic, just constant. I hadn't thought about him and not that day, I mean. I'd been thinking about pasta and my cousin's boyfriend. And then, I watched William lean his head slightly toward his daughter, tilting it in a way that looked like listening, and my throat closed. My father used to do that. Exact same angle. Exact same quality of attention, not waiting for you to finish so he could talk, but actually gathering you in. I used to tell him about things I'd found at the park. Feathers, mostly. Interesting rocks. Sticks with unusual bends. He treated every single one like I'd brought him a dispatch from a world he needed to understand. I had not thought about that in 18 months. It came back in about 4 seconds. My cousin put her hand on my arm again, different pressure this time, not the grip of surprise but the steadiness of someone who knows what's happening to you and isn't going to make it worse by saying anything. That's its own kind of grace. On the path ahead, Charlotte stood up, holding whatever she'd found, and showed it to her father with both hands outstretched. An offering. A discovery. The most important thing in the world. William took it with both hands. Looked at it seriously. Said something. Charlotte's face, even from distance, even through tears I hadn't quite decided to let fall yet, was lit up like she'd just been told she was right about everything. I noticed the protection officers later than I should have. 2 of them, or at least 2 I could identify, though there may have been more tucked into the casual crowd in ways I couldn't read. One was positioned further back on the path, a broad-shouldered man in civilian clothes doing the specific kind of not looking that is actually very focused watching. The second was closer, stationed near a park bench about 15 meters to the side, hands loose, expression neutral in the professional way. They'd seen us notice. They'd clocked every person in the immediate vicinity the moment William and Charlotte stopped. That's the job, that's the machinery underneath every one of these moments, the invisible infrastructure that allows a father and daughter to crouch in gravel without the world closing in on them. And here's the thing, nobody was closing in. Not a single person moved toward them. Not the Italian teenagers with their phones already in hand. Not the woman with the double buggy. Not the man with the kite, who had now sat down on the grass entirely and appeared to have decided he lived there. Not me. There was an unspoken collective agreement happening in real time among a group of strangers who had never met and would never meet again. Something like, we are going to give them this. I don't know how it forms. I don't know why, in a world of instant posting and viral moments, the human instinct in that specific afternoon chose quiet. But it did. One of the security detail, the man near the bench, caught my eye for a moment. Not confrontational. Not a warning. Just a look that said I see you and, then, more quietly, thank you. He looked away. I looked away. On the path, Charlotte had taken her discovery back and was now pointing at something, a tree, maybe, or something beyond the tree, and William straightened to his full height, looking where she pointed, shielding his eyes with one hand against the slant of light in that way men do, that instinctive gesture that probably hasn't changed since people first started pointing at things in fields. He nodded slowly. Whatever she'd pointed at, it was clearly worth nodding about. Then, she tugged his hand and they started walking again. Unhurried. The same pace as before. Charlotte's free hand had gone back to swinging. William kept his gaze forward but angled down slightly, that small calibration of height that parents do, keeping you always slightly in peripheral vision, that subconscious geometry of keeping track of someone small. The Italian teenagers let out a collective exhale and someone, a girl in a red jacket, said something in Italian that made her friends laugh softly. The woman with the double buggy started pushing again. The man on the grass picked up his kite string. The held breath released. The afternoon resumed. My cousin and I didn't speak for a few minutes. We walked in the same direction, not following, just continuing on the same path, with a respectful buffer of distance, and the silence between us was a different kind from before. Not the silence of nothing to say. The silence of something having happened that neither of us had words sized correctly for yet. "Did you see his face?" she said finally. "Yeah." When she showed him the thing. "Yeah." We walked. "He looked so, I know." She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. We both knew the word. It was an ordinary word for what we'd seen, maybe too small for it, but it was the right one. Happy. Not performed. Not curated. Not the bright, measured expression you see in official photographs, that particular composure that public figures have to learn like a second language. Just a man, genuinely happy, in the presence of his daughter, on a Tuesday afternoon in pale spring light, holding something she'd found on the ground. The castle behind them. The centuries behind the castle. All of it invisible to him in that moment, or at least irrelevant. Just the small hand in his. Just the thing she'd found. Just her voice explaining why it mattered. They rounded a curve in the path and were gone. Not dramatically. Not with fanfare or the closing of a car door or the click of a gate. Just the long walk curving gently, the chestnut trees closing behind them, and the afternoon continuing as if it had never been interrupted, which, from the afternoon's perspective, it hadn't. The protection officers moved out of their positions so smoothly I almost didn't register it. One moment present, next moment dissolving back into the crowd of ordinary people. That, too, is its own kind of skill. The absence of trace. I stood there for a while. My cousin stood beside me. The kite man had gotten his kite up finally, it was catching now, pulling on its string in that jerky, insistent way, climbing in small lunges toward the blue. "Do you want to talk about your dad?" my cousin said. "Not yet." Okay. She knows me well enough to know that not yet isn't no. It's just that some things need to travel through you before they're ready to become sentences. The feeling I'd had, that sudden, winded recognition when William tilted his head, was still working its way through me, doing whatever it needed to do in the quiet. We walked back toward the town. The light was moving. The gold had gone slightly orange, the way it does in the hour before it gives up entirely, painting the undersides of clouds in colors that feel designed to make you feel something. I am generally suspicious of beautiful light because it works on me every time without my consent. I have thought about that afternoon a lot since. Not obsessively. Not in the way of someone who puts too much weight on a chance encounter with famous strangers. But, genuinely, the way you think about moments that caught you off guard, the ones that slipped past whatever emotional security you'd installed and did something to you before you could decide whether to let them. There's a version of this story that's about royalty. About Prince William's visible warmth as a father, about Charlotte's personality vivid and animated and clearly comfortable in her own skin in ways that speak well of how she's being raised. About catching a glimpse behind the careful public image, the evidence that whatever weight comes with that family's name and history, those two people, in that specific hour, were just themselves. That version is true. But it's not the version I kept. What I kept was simpler. A father crouching down to be level with something his daughter found important. The specific quality of his attention, not performed, not dutiful, but real when she held something out to him with both hands. The laugh that didn't know it was being watched. The way she pulled his hand and he followed, tilting slightly, the whole geometry of him adjusting to keep her at the center. And the thought that crept in quiet, underneath all of it, that I didn't let myself think fully until I was home and the pasta was made and my cousin had gone. My dad used to do that. He used to do exactly that. I don't carry many things from that period of loss, the 18 months after, that don't feel heavy. Most of what grief gives you weighs something. The empty chair. The unanswered call still sitting in your phone. The specific way certain lighting or certain smells arrive without warning and knock you sideways. That afternoon in Windsor gave me something I hadn't expected. Not a release, exactly. Not that clean. More like a reminder. That it happens. That the crouching down, the full attention, the taking something with both hands, that it happens and it's real and I had it, whatever else is true. I had it for a long time. Some people don't get it at all. The kite was high now, tiny against the orange sky, the string barely visible from a distance, just a shape pulling against its constraints with no plan to stop. A source close to the family, one of those quiet phrases that shows up in royal reporting, attributed to no one, hovering between rumor and record, was quoted the following week as saying that William makes a point of unstructured time with his children whenever the schedule allows. Not organized activities. Not supervised outings with staff. Just time. The kind where nothing is planned and the child leads and the parent follows, even if what they're following is a gravel path and a small discovery the child finds more interesting than anything the adult world has scheduled that day. I read that and thought, yes. That's what I saw. Nothing more complicated than a father following his daughter's attention. Nothing less extraordinary than that. My cousin texted me 2 days later. Did you Google it? I had, of course. I'd found the small handful of long-lens photographs someone had taken and sold to a wire service, distant, grainy, the two of them caught mid-walk, Charlotte mid-gesture, William mid-lean. The photos were fine. They documented it. But they couldn't hold what had actually been in the air. The collective held breath of a dozen strangers. The kite finally, climbing. The sound of Italian girls laughing softly at something that moved them. The feeling of recognition hitting you sideways on a Tuesday when you just come out for a walk. I texted back, yeah. Me too, she said. And then, he really loved that thing she found. And I thought, he really did. Whatever it was. The long walk stays long. The chestnuts keep their opinions. Somewhere in Windsor, on a Tuesday in late spring, something small happened that most of the world will never know about and some of the world already forgot. I didn't forget it. I'm not sure I'm supposed to. Some afternoons reach into you and rearrange something, and the polite thing to do is let them. That was one of those afternoons. That's all. That's everything.